George Washington might not be the man you think he was, and the America he built might have been designed for someone else entirely. What if the layout of Washington D.C. wasn't random, but a secret map engineered by Freemasons to control the future of the country? What if the most powerful city in the world is also the most manipulated? And what if you've been walking through its hidden code for years, without ever realizing it? Here's what we do know. On October 13, 1792, George Washington ordered a cornerstone ceremony at the southeast corner of the White House. Imagine it, a block of white limestone, the size of a trunk, lowered into place as the crowd watched. Corn, wine, oil, poured over the stone in a ritual older than America itself, symbols of nourishment, refreshment, and joy. But this wasn't political theater. It was a full Masonic rite, a tradition stretching back centuries, whispered to carry more than symbolic power. And then, the stone was gone. Not broken, not buried, gone. Despite centuries of searches, by researchers, construction crews, even ground-scanning radar, it has never been found. So, how does the symbolic foundation of the White House just vanish? Maybe it was misplaced. Or maybe, it was never meant to be found. Because here's the uncomfortable possibility. That stone wasn't just the first piece of a building. It might have been the ignition switch for something much bigger, a design meant to shape not just the White House, but the nation itself. And if that design is still running today, we might all still be living inside it. To understand how a secret network could shape a nation, you can't start in Washington, D.C. You have to go back, centuries, to medieval Europe. In the 13th century, power was locked in the hands of kings, popes, and armies. But there was one group that could slip between their worlds, the stonemasons. Men with no single master. They built castles, cathedrals, city walls. And because they built for everyone, they could travel anywhere. A rare privilege in an age when most people never left their village. That freedom wasn't just about miles. It was about doors. Doors into palaces, into sacred chambers, into the most guarded spaces of the medieval world. And inside those walls, they left more than stone. They left marks, symbols carved into the corners of arches, hidden in flourishes of stonework. To you, they'd look like lines and chisels. To another Mason, they could be a warning. Or a secret. One of those symbols, I guarantee you've seen it before. Flash frame. A blurred outline of the compass and square faintly over a modern DC street map, gone before you can process it. Over time, those marks became rituals. Those rituals hardened into rules, passed down in secret from master to apprentice. The oldest we know of is the Regis manuscript from 1390, part rulebook, part myth, linking Masons to Euclid, and to ancient kings. By the 1600s, the age of cathedral building was dying. But instead of fading, the Masons evolved. The lodges that once held men with rough hands began welcoming men who had never touched a chisel, aristocrats, scientists, philosophers. Why? Because those outsiders saw something in the craft far more valuable than stonework. A moral system, a worldview, a blueprint for building society itself. The square, the compass, the level, once tools of construction, became metaphors for fairness, restraint, balance. And in the privacy of the lodge, those symbols shielded ideas that could topple empires. What is justice? Who truly deserves power? Can morality exist outside the church? Asking those questions in public could get you exiled. Inside the lodge, you were safe. By 1717, the first Grand Lodge rose in England. The Masons were no longer just builders, they were thinkers, nobles, revolutionaries. An invisible alliance, bound by handshakes and history. To outsiders, harmless. Behind closed doors, a disciplined hierarchy, coded language, centuries of origin myths. The perfect cover. No one questions a builder's club, especially one that can quote geometry like scripture, invoke biblical kings, and draft constitutions in poetic code. By the time the Enlightenment set Europe on fire, the Masons already had everything they needed. Access to power, a tradition of secrecy, a global network operating in plain sight. The only thing missing was a canvas big enough to etch their vision into reality. And when that canvas appeared across the Atlantic, they were ready. Ready to lay a design that wouldn't just build a city, it would build a machine. When the American Revolution ended, the founders didn't just inherit a victory, they inherited a blank canvas. Where should the new capital go? What should it look like? For some of the men at the table, many of them Freemasons, this wasn't just a matter of politics or convenience. It was their moment. The first chance to turn the centuries-old blueprint into something you could walk through. So the capital of the United States wasn't just placed. It was engineered, down to its angles, alignments, and hidden symbols. Thomas Jefferson, obsessed with ancient geometry, proposed a 10 by 10 mile diamond, perfect symmetry. But in Masonic tradition, a diamond isn't just clever design, it's a rotated square, a symbol of cosmic balance. Then came the boundary stones. 40 of them. Each one set with precision. Each one laid with ritual. To outsiders, it looked like careful planning. To insiders, it was consecration, as if they were tracing a temple floor across the landscape itself. And at the center of that temple, George Washington, a master mason, presided over the White House cornerstone ceremony. Corn, wine, oil. Symbols of joy, prosperity, and life. Then, nothing. The stone vanished. Not buried. Not destroyed. Not found by ground scans or demolition crews. If you think that's just bad record keeping, remember, some stones aren't meant to be found. And here's where the map starts whispering. Look closer at the city's design. Monuments align. Avenues radiate. And if you connect the right points, something begins to take shape. Not just streets. A signature. The same mark carved into medieval stones across Europe. The compass and square. Skeptics call it coincidence. Enlightenment-era geometry. Rational planning. But even rational plans have authors, and authors have intentions. Because in Freemasonry, every tool is metaphor. Every structure, a message. So if this city is a message, what is it trying to say? Zoom in on the Capitol. It sits at the center of DC's 4 quadrants. Perfect symmetry. A keystone placement. To most, it's just government representation. But symbolically, it's the eye, the watcher, the anchor in a symbolic machine. Still think it's just a city? Because in Masonic philosophy, the greatest cathedral isn't made of stone. It's made of society itself. And here, the cathedral was the city. Washington, D.C. wasn't just designed. It was charged. A ritual space. A symbolic system in stone. The prototype. And if you know how to read it, you might just find its blueprints hidden somewhere else. If I told you the same blueprint that shaped Washington, D.C. might be running the system you live in right now, would you even notice? You wouldn't see soldiers in the streets. You wouldn't hear orders over a radio. You'd just wake up inside it, thinking everything was normal. Because the Freemasons didn't just build a city. They built a framework, one that could be applied anywhere. No bricks required. Just ideas. And that's why the real secret isn't buried under a missing cornerstone. It's hidden in the way those ideas move. When people imagine the Freemasons controlling history, they picture smoke-filled rooms, puppet strings, secret handshakes. But the truth is stranger, and far more effective. Freemasonry wasn't designed for conquest. It was designed for persistence. Decentralized, adaptable. A system that could survive revolutions, wars, even civil wars inside its own ranks. At its peak, millions of members belonged to lodges worldwide. Yet there was no single doctrine. No master plan. Influence didn't move from the top down. It spread sideways, like software installing itself on every cultural operating system it touched. And if you think this is ancient history, look closer. There's a Masonic lodge operating just 1 block from the White House, meeting under the same symbols, repeating the same rituals, and swearing the same oaths George Washington did. Different members, different era, same blueprint. That's why the illusion of unity was part of the design. You could walk past 2 lodges on the same street, never realizing they might be working toward completely different goals, and still using the same handshake to seal the deal. Then came the fracture. In 1877, the Grand Orient de France removed the requirement to believe in a grand architect of the universe. For some, progress. For others, heresy. The result? One tradition split into 2 ideological branches: spiritual versus secular, symbolic order versus political action. From then on, you could have 2 rival lodges in the same city, backing opposing revolutions, without ever dropping the same handshake. The lodge became a political arena, one you could never shut down. No crown to cut off, no headquarters to burn, no fixed ideology to outlaw. That's what made it unstoppable. And here's the genius. Most power structures need armies, elections, or charismatic leaders. Freemasonry didn't. It moved through shared values, repeatable rituals, and the quiet alignment between belief, behavior, and belonging. So why don't you hear about it now? Because the most powerful influence doesn't declare itself. It blends in. The compass and square? Just a logo. A downtown lodge? Just tradition. An oath? Just theater. It doesn't vanish. It becomes mundane. And once something feels ordinary, your guard drops, which raises the more dangerous question. If this network has no borders, no king, no single manifesto, how would you even know it's still alive? Maybe you wouldn't, because a system like this doesn't survive by staying the same. It evolves, from stone and parchment, to culture and cognition, from visible blueprints, to invisible ones. So maybe the vanished cornerstone was never the foundation at all. Maybe the real foundation is a mental framework, and once that's built, it doesn't matter where the stones are. If it worked once, who's using it now? Because if Freemasonry became a global influence protocol, then maybe the system we're living in today wasn't built for us at all. For centuries, the Freemasons have been treated like historical wallpaper, old lodges, strange rituals, half-forgotten symbols. But what if that's exactly how they wanted it? Because the deeper you look, the more it becomes clear. They weren't just building cathedrals, cities, or monuments. They were building frameworks, designed to survive, adapt, and evolve long after the original builders were gone. And that's why the missing cornerstone might not matter, because the real foundation was never stone. It was a system, a way to embed power inside symbols, alignments, and rituals until the meaning disappears, and the influence remains. Even today, ceremonial cornerstones are laid at government buildings with corn, wine, and oil. Presidents attend. Crowds watch. No one asks why. It's tradition. Harmless. Until you remember where that ritual came from. So maybe the question isn't whether the Freemasons controlled history. Maybe they just wrote the manual on how to build influence that lasts, quietly, symbolically, systemically. And maybe the scarier question is, who else read it? Because if power can be embedded in a city's layout, if values can be encoded into ritual, if belief can be manufactured through design, then the system we're living in might not be the one we think it is. If it worked once, who's running it now? Because if Freemasonry became a global influence protocol, then maybe the system we're living in today wasn't built for us at all. And maybe that missing cornerstone was never lost, it's just been hiding in plain sight. Subscribe now if you are ready to uncover more hidden truths.